Good afternoon. A senior Conservative MP says the UK must do more to support Ukraine as Russian troops gather at its border. Tobias Ellwood, who chairs the Commons Defence Committee, said he thought an invasion was now imminent and that President Putin was taking full advantage of a weakened West. Russia has denied that it's planning an invasion, but the US has delivered 90 tons of what it calls lethal aid to Ukraine, the first shipment since the fresh promise of assistance from President Biden. James Waterhouse reports now from the Ukrainian capital, Kiev.
The Friendship of Nations Arch, built by the Soviets to celebrate the closeness between Russians and Ukrainians. That crack was painted on by activists a few years ago as relations between the two countries deteriorated. And as talks intensify about a possible invasion, the hope is things don't break down completely. Tensions are still rising on the border. Today, Russian jets made their way to joint military drills with neighbouring Belarus. Ukrainian ministers have welcomed the delivery of US military equipment and now a call for the UK to step up its own support. The British government has delivered 2,000 anti-tank missiles this week and says it's open to sending more weapons.
Ultimatum demanding NATO push back. Of course, that was dismissed, but that's given him the pretext to actually say that there is an aggressor and that he must act. But he also recognised that he will never again be as strong as this to take advantage of the West's weakness. I suspect an invasion is now imminent.
So does Kiev feel like a city preparing for an invasion? Evelyn and Lillian are too small to appreciate the power struggle surrounding their country, but their parents Serhiy and Valeria obviously aren't.
It's definitely concerning. It definitely seems more tense than the past times that we were concerned about this. I'd say it's definitely increasing, like anxiety and stuff, for sure.
Of course, I'm afraid. I don't want Ukraine to be just like Donbass right now, just like Donetsk. It will be it's a nightmare for me.
If I see others do it, says Ivan, I'm ready to defend my country. I'm not going to run away, but then again, there might not be anywhere to run away to. Moscow denies that it's planning an invasion, but it's easy to forget Ukraine's already endured 8 years of Russian aggression. It's brought fighting, cyber attacks, misinformation, and constant uncertainty. Next week, the US will continue to discuss Russia's demands that NATO will both scale back its military presence and rule out ever letting Ukraine join. For the country at the heart of it, that uncertainty goes on. James Waterhouse, BBC News in Kiev.
William Ragg, the Conservative MP who accused Downing Street of trying to blackmail some MPs trying to oust Boris Johnson, says he's due to meet the police next week to discuss his claims. He's been backed by the Labour MP Chris Bryant, who says any such behaviour would be illegal. Downing Street says it's not seen any evidence to support the allegations, but would look closely if proof were presented. Here's our political correspondent, Damien Grammaticus.
Already under pressure, the coming days could prove decisive for Boris Johnson. Now there's a new concern. The fact that one of the main rebel MPs who've already written letters of no confidence in him is due to talk to the police possibly on Monday. The MP, William Ragg, this week alleged he'd been told others had faced threats. They might lose funding for their constituencies if they didn't back the Prime Minister.
The intimidation of a Member of Parliament is a serious matter. Moreover, the reports of which I'm aware would seem to constitute blackmail.
On Wednesday, Mr Johnson was there when another of the rebels, Christian Wakeford, defected to Labour. He claims he was told some time ago funding for a school might not happen if he didn't support the government over free school meals. Today, a senior Labour MP said he'd heard more claims.
I must have spoken to about a dozen Tory MPs in the last few days who have made similar allegations about whips either offering to withdraw financial support for their constituencies, either from the political parties, so for campaigning, or for their constituents.
Downing Street says if evidence emerges, it will be looked at seriously, but it's not investigating as it isn't aware of anything to back up the claims. And Tory MPs are waiting to see if there is more substance to them.
I have voted against the government on occasions when I thought it right. And I have to say, I've always had a very close relationship with the Chief Whip, and indeed a very productive relationship with Whip. So I'm waiting to hear more about this because it's not something I've seen or been told about.
The other person looking for evidence is Sue Gray, the civil servant investigating the Downing Street parties. Her report should come this week. The question for Boris Johnson, who's at the official country retreat of Chequers, can he survive it unscathed? He's thought to be busy plotting his strategy and calling his MPs, trying to secure their support. Dane Grammaticus, BBC News.
Let's take a look now at the latest coronavirus figures. There were over 76,800 new COVID infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, but that figure doesn't include Scotland. On average, just over 91,700 new cases were reported per day in the last week. The latest figures show there were just under 18,000 people in hospital being treated for coronavirus on Thursday. 297 deaths were reported in the latest 24-hour period. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive test, although there will be some amongst this number who won't have died from COVID. On average, in the past week, 270 deaths were announced every day. On vaccinations, over 36.8 million people have had a booster jab, which means that 64% of people aged 12 and over have now had 3 vaccine doses. The former Olympic champion cyclist Chris Boardman is to head up a new organisation to encourage cycling and walking in England. Active Travel England wants to improve infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrians and also fund projects to enhance air quality. Our North of England correspondent Fiona Trott reports now from York.
It's meant to be healthy, but cycling can be hazardous. That's because not all towns and cities have dedicated routes. One aim of Active Travel England is to ensure cyclists and walkers are considered in future planning applications.
You want places where your kids can walk or ride to school and you can trundle to work on a bike. And to do that, you won't do it unless you feel safe, or you can look out the car window and go, oh, that looks quite nice. And that's what this agency will do.
Active Travel England will be based in York. Campaigners here welcome it.
I think it's brilliant, really, because we've got lots of good little bits, but they're always let down by some busy junction or some scary bit where traffic goes.
Secure cycle parking is another part of the strategy to link up with rail services, and there'll be subsidies for businesses to use bikes to carry cargo too. But above all else, it's just about making our towns and cities feel safer and less polluted, so we want to walk or cycle. But will it work?
York is so small as it is that it's more connecting outside city centre to other, public places like the university, getting those connections going where people are actually cycling.
I think you've got to start somewhere. You've got to invest in things. The more people you get cycling and walking, the more people are likely to look at those people cycling and walking and start cycling themselves.
The strategy is part of a £2 billion package already announced for walking and cycling schemes over a 5-year period. But some campaigners say its success will depend on drivers changing their behaviour too. Fiona Trott, BBC News, York.
Tennis, and the British men's #1 Dan Evans was beaten by the Canadian 9th seed Felix Auger-Aliassime in straight sets at the Australian Open. His defeat means there are no British players left in the singles competitions. Here's our sports correspondent Adam Wilde.
Daniel Evans.
As singles go in Melbourne, Dan Evans was now the single Brit left. Ahead, the considerable talent of Canadian Felix Auger-Aliassime. Evans immediately forced to face the music.
I'm playing in the middle of a live band.
Although for him perhaps rather too literally, the sound of a singer entertaining crowds outside the arena, seemingly hitting more raw nerves than right notes.
It's not like it's a little bit loud, it's on the court.
I agree with you. Is it normal, asked Evans? Well, plenty about this tournament hasn't felt that way so far. Still, the band played on a little longer, and so did Evans, other Brits now keeping him company. Competitive for much of the first set until an error let it all slip away. A change of shirt offering little change in fortune. Auger-Aliassime taking control, Evans at times losing it completely. A straight sets defeat and Evans' tournament comes to an end. After such high hopes for British tennis of late, the second week of singles in Melbourne will have no Brits at all. Adam Wilde, BBC News.
Well, that's it for now. We're back with the late news at 10 past 10. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Bye-bye.